Whatever, ready, homie?
Spicy pizza.
Let me get the PVE ready. Gotta get all the phlegm out before.
Alright. Am I good?
Go for it, yep.
Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast, a podcast covering everything in gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at r/true gaming on Reddit. We're going to be looking at your ideas, your thoughts, your hot takes, and your bold opinions. I'm Kai.
And my name's Jared, and our first article we have is from user Dmitry Takarov, which is a badass name. And he says, PvE versus PvP. What is the most enjoyable? So he says, I've seen a variety of games with PvE elements or PvP elements, but each person has a preference, and PvP games seem to have been on the rise for a long time with battle royales, first-person shooters, etc. PvE games, to me, has a lot more entertainment to it, since lately I have seen a lot of toxic behavior in a lot of games that I've played online when playing PvE. PvP is also fun too, since the gameplay of certain PvP games can appeal to many. However, I ask you in this discussion, what is your preference and why do you like this preference in games? PvE or PvP? What's your opinions, Kai? I'm curious. I know you play a lot of Fortnite. I know you play that Apex.
All the time. I prefer PvP games. And I think the reason is that the skill curve is much more exponential in PvP because you're playing against real people, so it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to be more challenging. There's more of a barrier to entry of playing because if you suck, you're just going to drop in and then die immediately, and that's
or you'll continue and you'll get better. And
right. Well, that's the idea. Is you keep practicing, but unfortunately, people's skills are increasing at the same rate as yours. So the people who come in with the highest level of skill continually dominate those below them, which
that's true.
It makes it democratic, but at the same time, I haven't played a PvE game in a really long time.
Well, and see, that's kind of not the issue, but I associate PvE games with games that are local multiplayer, games that are split screen and stuff like that. And when I think about that side of gaming, I have a little nostalgia to it because I did grow up playing
I think the first PvE was like what, Modern Warfare that I played. I don't know.
Oh man, a first PvE game. Maybe like zombies and stuff like that. I don't know. There had to have been.
There had to be something before that. Well, like,
or it's cool.
I know that I played because the first Modern Warfare didn't have a bot. Like you couldn't play bots, but you could play the Horde mode.
Well, that was 3. They didn't even have that until 3. Okay. Call of Duty World at War, which was after 4.
Right. That was the
first one that had Nazi zombies, which is kind of the first. To my knowledge, the first kind of co-op that you can do in those Call of Duty games. But I mean, even with the split screen games, a lot of it was still you versus your friends. So it was still PvP, you know?
Yeah.
But like you were saying, I mean, with PvP, there is the hierarchy of people that are good at this. You'll have people that are at the top, and that'll always be at the top. I mean, maybe bumped down by a couple people, but still stay in that area of being good at this game. And then you have people like us, which are
I will say that's the frustrating thing about playing a game like Zombies is like at first the first level is like you're figuring it out and it's challenging and you're like, oh, this is what I need to do, or this is what I need to do, or this gun works better than this gun. But when you play through Zombies and you get really good at it, those first 15 levels is just nothing. So boring. You're just I've done this 150,000 times. And that has less to do with PvE and more to do with the game design and how it's always the same. So.
And with that sense, I mean, with PvE, usually it's if you're in the area of zombies, you only have yourself to blame if something goes wrong. Oh, I reloaded at the wrong time. I decided to charge into the horde of zombies instead of holding back. Where in PvP, you're clearly that guy's better than me.
Right.
I couldn't really do anything about it. I had no control in that sense.
Or if you're before the free-to-play PvP games, you're that guy bought everything.
Right,
and
exactly.
I'm sad.
I mean, I will say that there is more of a rise with online PvP games, like Apex and Fortnite.
PlayerUnknown Battleground.
Right, all of the Battle Royale games. And I mean, Dimitri talks about the toxicity in these games. And I've heard about them. I haven't actually experienced any toxicity myself. You know, I like when we're playing and stuff like that where we've been focused on in any sense of like, man, you suck, or get out of here. Well, okay, there was one time when I was playing, I think it was like Black Ops 3, and someone messaged me and said, "You fucking suck, leave."
My soul.
My soul.
My soul is broken.
I was more impressed. I was like, you took the time to pause your game, open your messenger. Messaging on the Xbox is god awful, by the way, so you know he misspelled things lots of times. And then send me the message. I was like,
I can't imagine taking the time out of my day to be like, you know what? This guy's so bad that I gotta write a sentence.
I had to write a sentence telling him how bad it is.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I was very impressed. So I guess my preference, I guess it would be PvP. That's what I've been playing the most. I would say that Borderlands is a PvE game, because it's both of us versus these hordes of characters and stuff like that, where a lot of games don't have that cooperative. I guess like Destiny, that's a PvE game as well.
Yeah.
And it has PvP aspects to it, because you can play online against other people, or the story is you going and fighting hordes of characters and then continuing on fighting hordes of characters and then continuing on with a group of 4 or group of friends and stuff like that.
It would be interesting to play like a PvE game in a broad, like, online place. Like, if it was, like, 99 versus 1, but one had abilities that the others didn't.
Well, there was kind of games that touched on that. Like, did you ever play Evolve?
No.
At all? So, the concept of Evolve, which they're making a new game called Predator Hunting Grounds. It has, like, the Predator, Alien Predator story to it. But the whole concept is one person is a character that is extremely overpowered than all the rest. Like in Evolve, you play these giant monsters, these giant creatures, dragons and stuff like that have different abilities, and then you have 4 other people that are just normal humans that have just guns and arsenals and stuff like that. So there is that game. Evolve was like that, and then Predator.
It's like what's the super popular game? Friday at Freddy's or whatever.
The Friday the 13th.
Yeah, where it's like you play, one character gets to be super overpowered, Jason or any of the horror, classic horror villains, right. And then there's a team
Dead by Daylight.
Dead by Daylight, thank you. Yeah, and there's the 5 other people who are just normal who have to stop him by activating, different generators or escaping or using a car or... Which
I didn't know that this was a thing before the game not came out, but before I looked into it, that you can kill each other. Like the camp counselors could kill each other, so people were just killing each other and then leaving. And then they patched it where, okay, you guys have to work together. You can't just kill your other counselors and then leave. Because it's supposed to be like 5 against 1, but the 5 were just killing each other.
That's way more fun. It's more realistic.
Which would actually happen, yeah.
Yeah, so like, that's a good example of a game where everyone has human reactions. Because like a lot of the problems of like bots or computer characters is either they're way too easy or they're way too hard. Having a balanced computer is an insanely difficult thing to do, because you can even do it on Call of Duty. If you play bots on the normal, they're walking around aimlessly. Like, if you're playing on Recruit...
There's a big difficulty gap.
Yeah, it's like, they're walking around aimlessly, you can kill everyone, and then you, put it up to Veteran, and all of a sudden, they're, shooting before you come around a corner. Like, they know you're there, which is, that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's something a human can't do.
Right, exactly. Something that Dimitri asks later in this post, he asks, do you play both, or do you ignore a certain one? And I think I play both. I think the problem is now there's more PvP than PvE games, so it's just kind of hard ignoring them in the sense of the PvP is a more popular genre, and there's more games that are PvP than PvE.
Yeah, and I think it's like, it's not one is better than the other, it's not one is superior than the other, it's how you work in the confines of that development, strategy. Like, all right, we're gonna make a PvE game. Either it's gonna be good or bad, and it's like there are PvP games that suck,
right,
and there are PvE games that suck, and there are both that are great. So it's just how you use that, ability to
Right.
shape the game is important.
I think it also just depends on the community as well, like what's popular and what isn't. Because there's
Yeah.
definitely a time in gaming history where there was no PvP, at least online, or wasn't as popular.
But don't you think that's because of restrictions on like internet bandwidth and
Yeah, probably.
because like and when PVE was super popular, it was back when multiplayer sucked.
Right.
And so it was like, we can create computer characters, or we can create, in-game characters that are much more functioning than having to try to connect all these people together and play.
Right.
We finally got into a place where we can connect 100 people to a match and have servers that can carry that amount of information.
Right.
So it's like...
Do you remember the first game you played, like PvP online? Like the very first game you played online before?
The very first game I played online.
Like your very first experience playing online, like games against other people?
It's definitely a Call of Duty. It's definitely at our friend Tyler's house. Yeah, it was definitely a Call of Duty game.
The first of the four? Or not the first one, but Modern Warfare.
Yeah, Modern Warfare, for sure. Where it was like online multiplayer.
Right.
And I remember thinking, this looks real. This is real life. And now playing it back, I'm like, oh my god, what was I thinking?
Garbage.
It looks terrible. But I think that was probably the first. What about you? What was your first online multiplayer game?
My first PvP experience online had to be one of the Halos. I think it was like Halo 3 or Halo Reach. It was one of those two. I remember that...
Oh, never mind. I know what it is. It was RuneScape. RuneScape was
I
definitely...
played a lot of RuneScape too. Well, do you remember a lot of those like online browser games that you would play?
Yeah. Where you create like a character and it was like a hangout chat room kind of thing.
Yeah. There was one that was like
popular.
it took place in like medieval times and stuff like that. And I played so much of that.
Yeah, I played a lot of those games. It was like flash games that were like super.
And everyone just
online.
tried hitting on like the girl character that was in, which we'll get to later on.
Yeah, we'll cover that later. Yeah.
RuneScape was some of those early like flash browser games that you would play.
Those were
that
my
was,
first
like, online
like,
chat rooms and stuff.
PvP kind of esque.
Well,
massive
and see,
online role playing.
And see, with those, I would say, just to counter argument with saying RuneScape or those games are PvP, is because they were pretty passive. I mean, you weren't really fighting against... It was a chat room, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you did have the ability to kill other players.
You do.
But I don't think it happened as much. Like, I just remember it being pretty passive experiences in both RuneScape and in...
Well, it's more the main... There was no benefit to killing someone because you just... I think you fucked up your skill tree or something like that. I don't remember. But, like, the main point of that game was, like, dungeon exploring. So, like, finding items and... So, there's no immediate benefit to killing someone other than it's fun.
Okay, well then on the flip side, do you remember your first PvE kind of games or experiences?
I mean, it was zombies.
Zombies?
No, I already said it was.
Okay.
I already answered.
Zombies.
It wasn't zombies. It was the
Bots in Modern Warfare 3.
It wasn't bots though. They were like the horde mode because there wasn't bots. You couldn't do bots.
No, yeah, it was. I think it was in 3 because you can do. I have Modern Warfare 3. It was like you would do the hordes of enemies. And like every 10, there'd be like a chopper gunner or like a juggernaut and stuff like that.
And you had to go to the computers and like upgrade your weapons.
Yeah. We should play that. That's really fun.
It is fun.
Oh damn! I was gonna say something. Has something to do with. I was gonna ask what your first PvE experience was, but you already talked about that. I mean that was definitely one of them, but Gears of War Horde mode. You played a lot of Horde mode in Gears of War, and that was hours into Gears of War 2 Horde mode. It's kind of fallen off from what Horde was originally, but they've added on it now. I mean, it's more of like a tower defense game because you can also like buy like every like round you get like a currency, and then you can buy things that'll slow down the enemies, like a spiked wall or like barbed wire and stuff like that. And
what was the game? Balloons or whatever it was.
Balloons,
that was super popular.
Gosh, I remember Balloons.
Technically, that's a PvE game because the balloons are everyone, and you're just the monkey.
Monkey versus balloons.
So it really depends. To answer your question, there's no benefit. I will say
it's all preference.
PvP is more popular right now.
Correct.
Because we have the ability to have hundreds of players competing against each other, which makes, esports way more functional and gives us the ability. I mean, esports would be really boring to watch. It was just one person against 100, and then you'd have to determine a winner, and that's incredibly difficult. So PvP allows for more competitive, democratic play. But at the same time, if you're a developer and you're really good at developing PvE games and like zombies and level building and stuff like that, it gives you a lot more opportunity to instill story, and it gives you a lot more opportunity to instill like, you know, character dynamics. And
I really enjoy those experiences. I mean, Destiny, they did a lot of things wrong.
They did a lot.
Let me just say that first. Destiny did a lot of things wrong.
You know.
But having those experiences where you can go and group up with your friends and take on these difficult hordes of enemies, which you probably wouldn't have been able to do on your own, that's a really fun experience, and it's just another way to experience gaming with your friends. But
yeah, another PvE game would be like Minecraft. Theoretically, all the enemies are trying to kill you, and you're the alone. I mean, unless you're playing it. I don't know how people played that game. When I played Minecraft originally in the beta, there was no online, so it was just you versus everyone, which is
okay. So PVE is player versus environment. Yes,
you're fighting creepers and spiders, etc.
But you're also fighting. I guess a lot of survival games would be that, because you're also fighting off the environment. Right. You can go into the water and you can drown. You can die of hunger.
Get shanked with a trident from a stupid water zone.
You can get struck by lightning. You can fall into a fire pit. And man, I want to play Minecraft.
So many options of death.
Anyways, the next topic is from username Yotes. Oh gosh.
Just spell it.
YOTSMUNGAND 90. I said 90, but that's it.
90.
I was gonna say 25, but that's how many days ago it was. So.
All right.
Yotes Mung.
Wow. What is it? Oh, Yachts Mung. Yeah, Yachts Mung and 90. Yachts Mung and 90.
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna call you Yachts. Yachts. We butchered your name. But anyways, your topic is quality versus quantity.
No, it's quality. Greater.
Quality is better than quantity in relation to game file size. So he says, explain me this.
Riddle me this.
Riddle me this, Batman. How could it be possible that today's insanely huge games are less funny and less replayable than any 16-bit, 32-bit, 6th-gen handheld generation games? Of course, I'm not referring to the 8-bit gen, which was very experimental, and many of the famous games of such era actually are unplayable by today's standards. Games that most of the time had huge file sizes, PS2, GameCube, Xbox, mostly because of the FMVs. Otherwise, they would be around 700 megabytes each. Same for PS1 and Saturn, with games around 200 megabytes at the most. Even the 3DS that had 1 gigabyte top because of the FMVs are way more playable than 90% of any modern console game. That was a bold statement.
That is a bold opinion.
Add it that many of such games can be easily modded, and you get potentially infinite content. Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Super Metroid, which he spelled wrong, and many other games have high quality fan mods that improve massively or totally overhaul the game in ways you wouldn't even expect. Think of Fire Emblem Sacred Wars as a total gameplay retooling on Fire Emblem 8 for Game Boy Advance.
Well, someone appreciates the 16 characters from Fire Emblem and Smash, I'll tell you that.
I noticed by watching trailers of next-gen games that there is too much busy work, and it's not even the good quality one. It's a grind. Plus, the formulas are always the same, and many games are way too cinematic in a wrong way, with way too long cutscenes for the sake of showing off. Thankfully, expectations are still there, which is good, but they should be the rule, not the exception.
Wow, that is an opinion right there.
When you talked about the cinematics are too long, it just reminded me of you, because I feel like you skip cinematics a lot.
I may or may not skip cutscenes. Okay, I wouldn't skip cutscenes in a game like GTA, because I like the story.
I think that's the difference. If you're interested and involved in the story, you watch it.
Right. And people have different ability to care for characters.
Or ability to pay attention for longer than 30 seconds.
I don't have that, so I have to skip the cutscenes.
But, I mean, in relation to a file size of a game is reducing its quality and saying that games nowadays aren't as funny or replayable. I think it's
I love
just,
the funny part.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've never rated a game on its humor.
Right. Well, another topic that we're going to kind of merge together with this is why do we love games, but I'll get more into that later. So, I mean, I guess if he's looking for... So his question is really that
funny? New games are bad, and I don't like them, and old games are fun, and I like replaying them.
Right.
That's pretty much the argument.
Well, and he talked about modding, which you can do with a lot of modern games.
People mod the hell out of GTA.
Oh, yeah, of course, which adds more replayability to the game.
I will say it takes a level of technical ability that's,
I think
much higher to mod GTA than it is to mod
like
an 8-bit.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, 8-bit and stuff like that. But I think what he's kind of referring to here is games nowadays are getting more and more cinematic, which loses the replayability, depending on who you are, of the game. Because it's like, well, I mean, I guess film and movies are the same. You watch it once, and then you've already seen the story, so people are like, why watch it again, But if it's a good story, then that
or
adds
if the story always changes.
Right.
Which is what games are kind of pushing towards, is games that have multiple paths that you can
where
take,
the player is more involved in the outcome of the story, which that adds, like, oh my gosh, Until Dawn. Until Dawn's one of those games where it adds replayability because you get options and you get to choose things. I mean, you can get to 5 minutes before the game ends, have saved all your characters, and then you do something wrong and you murder all your characters. That definitely wasn't a personal experience that happened to me. I'm so upset. Story time.
Story time.
So, in Until Dawn, it's kind of like the old slasher horror film. The teenagers go to the cabin, weird shit happens, they start dying. I did a great job of keeping all of those guys alive. There's like 8 characters. And they have these sequences where you have to hold the controller, and if you move the controller, that affects the gameplay and stuff like that. So there's like these demon creatures that come in. And one of your characters is hiding, and then a jump scare happened, and I shook the controller, and that character got murdered. And that set a series of events where all my characters after that just died. And I had 2 characters left at the end. I was so pissed.
Okay, wow.
I was very upset.
That was very personal.
But I can replay that game again and have a completely different outcome if I make different choices. And that's kind of what adds to the replayability. Like you were saying, nowadays games are more cinematic, but developers are trying to give the player more control in what happens in those cinematic experiences.
Well, also it's like the age of gaming has increased from what this guy's talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, from the 90s to the 2000s, yes, there were games that were aimed at adult players, but for the most part, gaming was looked at as a toy category.
A novelty. It's like, this is for kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Gaming wasn't as rounded and well developed and for everybody like it is now.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to how good we've gotten at showing games as, close to film as possible and having the most control in your environment, because it connects you more to the story, it connects you more to the environment, it connects you more to the characters, and that's one of the really amazing things about gaming.
It's funny or interesting because Death Stranding comes out this year. And we all know Death Stranding as being the weird-ass game where you can pee as Norman Reedus.
That's it.
That's it.
It's a pee sim.
But what Kojima just came out and was talking about, he was talking about the difficulty in the game. And you can set it where the game gets pretty difficult, but there's actually a difficulty called movie mode, where the mechanics and the gameplay are pretty simple. And if you're someone that just wants to see it from the cinematic viewpoint, because the game is there's a lot of very well-known actors in that game, and it is very cinematic. So if you're going into that game just for the story...
Yeah, it's like watching a hyper-realistic cartoon.
Right. So you can go into that game and have a difficulty where if you are a person that... And there is people like that. I mean, there is people that do play these games for the story, and they bump down the difficulty just so they can enjoy this experience, because the difficulty takes away from that accessibility and enjoying the experience.
Yeah. And some people's enjoyment comes from the difficulty and the challenge, which, that's why we have difficulty sliders for different people who want to experience different things.
Yeah, and I feel like Dark Souls is a good example of that. And I would say Dark Souls is less cinematic, but you get a lot of the world building from the world itself. Like, there's a lot of lore packed in. There's not a lot of cutscenes in Dark Souls. There's not a lot of dialogue in Dark Souls that adds to the lore. But as you're exploring the world, you find books and you find people, and those people and the literature add to the lore of the game and stuff like that as well, which adds to the kind of story-oriented aspect.
Word we created. And so to answer Yotes Magoat's 90s question,
or his
bold opinion of, you know, quality greater than quantity, even when it comes to file size, there's no correlation between quality and quantity.
Right.
You can play games that are huge, like Destiny, and suck, like Destiny. Or you can play games that are huge, like Red Dead, and are phenomenal games that you want to go back to, that you want to keep playing. Or you can play games
that are like 100 megabytes, and that are tiny little games, and are amazing. And there's also games that are that size that aren't good. Like Celeste is a small game. It's made by an indie developer. And that game was in the runs with God of War and Spider-Man for Game of the Year. Games like that, even though it might not be big and cinematic like those two games, it still was able to tell a story in the small file size that it had.
Minecraft is a perfect example of a game that relatively is a small title.
File size-wise,
everything is procedurally generated. There's no graphical, you know, challenge on the processor. It's very easy. Your barriers to entry are relatively little, and it's so fun. Everyone enjoys that game,
and everyone can get something
for the most part. Too. There are angry people, but
well, I think a lot of people. There's people that didn't like it because of the artistic, stylistic view that it went. Yeah. But those people were like, we're gonna make better graphics for this, and they created shaders, which makes the game look incredibly realistic and beautiful. So it's like,
well, and that goes to the modding thing. Is it's like people are gonna go back because they're gonna make it their own, but at the same time,
if you don't like it, make it better.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the moral of the story, if you can, I guess.
Yeah, so there's no correlation between quality and quantity. Quality is something that is defined by the story and the development, and just like films, there are indie films that are phenomenal and compete at the Oscars. Not that the Oscars are a fair or balanced approach to rating films, but that's another podcast. I mean, you know, there are indie films that compete at the Oscars, and there are huge, you know, studio films such as Black Panther competing with Green Book this last year. Obviously, Green Book is a very small, relatively low-budget film, and Black Panther was, at the time, one of the most expensive films ever made, and they were competing on the same scale, not because someone paid for them to be there, but because they both had merit as a story, and people enjoyed watching them. And so, you know, same thing with games. It completely depends on the passion of the people making it and the story that they're trying to tell, and how that connects with culture and people, rather than being like, you need 2 discs to install this game. It is going to be the best game ever made.
Right. I mean, for a while, that's what if you open a game, you're like, oh my gosh.
Oh my god, there's 2 discs.
Or like Final Fantasy VII, you're like, there's 5 discs. This game's gonna be amazing. Like, that's just
Change to disc 3, sir.
That just means that Sony pushed the limits of the PS2 to the extent of like, okay, we gotta tell this game's story in 5 discs, and that's just gonna how it works. I was surprised when I opened up Red Dead and there was 2 discs, and I was like, damn, Red Dead, you got a big disc.
You got a big disc.
It's moral of the story. It's not. Oh, damn you! It's not the size of your file; it's how you use it.
Exactly. All right.
So we're gonna take a quick break, and then the next one we're gonna talk about women in gaming.
Powerful women.
Women in gaming.
Respected women in gaming.
So we'll be back. And we're back! So, in this section, we're going to be talking about user Infinite Dreamer and his discussion on geek culture's problem with women. And this post was posted 6 years ago, but I still think that this problem is still prominent in today's society. I mean, maybe not as much, but it's still there. We still see these things where people are like, do you really play video games? I mean, you got boobs.
There's no way.
How
do you hold a controller with your small woman hand?
Yeah, I feel like that's stuff that people still think nowadays, which is completely ridiculous. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'll just read his article. So he says it's about anger. Have a read at this. And there's an article with another Reddit post that talks about. Actually, I'll just read the title of the other Reddit post to show the hostility of this man.
In case you want to find it.
So it's an attractive female cosplayer. Let's take her down a notch. Which is why? That doesn't make any sense. They're talking about Jessica Negri, for example, which she is been known to love gaming and love just what it's about, to the extent of cosplaying as some of her favorite characters. And just because she's a woman doesn't demean the fact that she likes gaming or not, or she's actually not a true gamer and stuff like that. Okay, let's continue to read this. So he says, there's a little small synopsis of the post. He's like, when I saw this post, I realized that apart from that person who cosplays because nerds give her attention, I had no idea who Jessica Negri actually was, only having seen all the posts on Reddit. So I checked her out on the Wikipedia page. Turns out that really is the whole story. She's just a cosplayer that likes video games. So what's going on here? Well, the Reader's Digest version goes on like this. An attractive woman is dressed as a character from a popular and much-loved video game. She's wearing a revealing outfit. When photos of her are posted, negative, hostile, demeaning, and outright hateful comments are upvoted heavily. This is the what. Now let's talk about the why. Why aren't there comments that are positive and encouraging? After all, gorgeous women dressed in skimpy video game character outfits to be a hit with mostly young male audiences, surely someone would drop a comment saying, wow, or great outfit. Which, I mean, again, you don't have to be a young male to enjoy a woman in skimpy clothing.
No, you don't.
There's a bunch of problems with this. I decided to count down the top level replies till I found a positive one that said more than boobs are good or some variation thereof. I made it to the 30th comment and I came across this. Does she actually make all of her costumes on her own? I heard she does. If so, that's really impressive. Which is begrudgingly positive, which we decided was an actual legitimate question. I think that this guy was just actually curious if she does make her own costumes, and if she does, then that's really cool, because I've seen some of her cosplays, or I've seen people that cosplay these amazing, intricate costumes, and they make their own, and they're incredible at this thing that they do. But he says, I say begrudgingly because he couldn't resist casting some doubt on whether she really makes her own stuff, which I don't think that's doubt. I think that's just curiosity rather than doubt. So again, why? Well, I'm no psychologist, but I am a geek. Has the same weight to it.
Doesn't it, though? I'm no doctor, but I play video games.
After this, he's like, I'm no psychologist, but I'm a geek, so I have first-hand experience and a wealth of well-researched anecdotes. Here's the explanation.
Well-researched anecdotes.
The nerds are angry.
They always are.
Not angry at Jessica Negri specifically, no. Angry at women as a homogenous group, and especially angry at attractive women, and even more so at attractive women. They're taking our jobs.
They're taking our jobs.
There's attractive women taking our video games. These are jokes, by the way. We don't believe any of this stuff. Sweeping generalizations ahead. Proceed with extreme caution. Data is not the plural form of anecdote. Yada, yada, yada. I'm still reading his post, by the way. These aren't my examples. This is so long. Oh, my gosh. Well, further down the line, there's big, bold words that says she's not a real nerd. She's just a friend-zoning bitch, which I can only see as being more hostile. So, if this is the problem, and you may disagree on the point, then how is it best to tackle it? How should we convince male nerds that a woman's value is not defined by her willingness to have sex with you? Whoa, this changed. I skipped a lot.
There's a lot of in-between that happens. Well, this is not a problem in just gaming, but it's a problem in pretty much every part of our culture as American culture and even Western culture broadly, and really across the world for the most part. Women are viewed as less than and sex symbols and sex objects, and that's because of an incredible amount of bro culture in gaming. Yeah. Which, Which is funny because that same bro culture is also the culture that doesn't like women in the video, or is confused and like, oh my gosh, do you actually play games? When they see women in that, so it's also like the original bro culture is what put down nerds and gamers, and now all of a sudden there's been a fusing of those two communities, and so there's also a topic in here, or a sentence where he talks about how, oh wait, I think I found it here. They blame this on the fact that because they're nerds, stuck-up, dumb women won't give them a chance. All the hot girls are only interested in jocks. That's why I never get any sex. Which, again, is... Which is a horrible thing to view. The reason you don't get any sex is because you're a terrible person who believes those ideas, and it is so foreign to me to think that people actually think this way, but I spend a lot of time on the internet, so I know that it's true, because I see them interact with one another all the time, and it's really hard to justify that belief system, and especially being a part of this community.
Right.
It's really hard to see, and I mean, there's multiple news articles talking about women, even in the workplace, who work for video game companies, where they're being sexually harassed, or they're being, you know, mistreated, or there are lists that exist at video game companies about the top, you know, coders or developers that the higher-ups want to have sex with, and that's just, you know, it's sickening to hear that it's such a horrible place for women to work, because they deserve a place at the table as much as anyone else does in this. And you know, one of the things about gaming culture is it's focused on equality. It doesn't matter if you're a huge super jack dude or you're a skinny nerd or whatever you define yourself as, is you can be whoever you want to be in games, and that it allows you to escape the reality of, you know, the world.
Exactly.
And if you're a woman and you enjoy playing video games and then you get crap for playing video games, that's terrible. It ruins the experience of being able to escape, because then it's just a reminder of, you know.
Yeah. And then you have something that you enjoy that you feel like you're not supposed to, or you feel like that you can't, which should never be the case. You should never be shunned by a community or people for doing something that you love doing.
And I mean, the root of the problem really comes down to the fact that the representation of women in video games is really disturbing. And, you know, obviously, sexual content sells games, and it always has, and that's why...
Right, well, sex sells everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Women in video games are always going to have huge boobs in tiny ways that don't make any sense, and, you know, because that attracts male audiences, and, yeah, just a whole bunch of prolific problems, but at the same time, it's like...
I mean, and luckily, we are seeing a lot of gaming developers and games that are focusing more on having a woman protagonist, and a woman protagonist that isn't a woman protagonist because she's in skimpy clothes, or because she's not attractive but exposed, but because she is strong, determined, or any of the sorts, you know? I mean,
and there's a test in film that the name is escaping me, but it judges female characters based on a bunch of criteria, but it's like, does the female character only interact with other male characters? Does the female character have a meaningful conversation with another female character that's not about a man? And, like, there's a bunch of these grading techniques, and that should be applied to video games as well. I mean, if we're supposed to equally represent, you know, the world and culture through video games, or even make a better culture through video games, which a lot of the time, you know, is what is being aimed to do, then we should, you know, represent women equally and represent them as,
or I mean,
and something that they're not being fully viewed as in our own culture.
Right. So. Or seeing all these people, and specifically in the gaming culture, as people, and trying to represent all of the people as best you can. Not specifically with women or ethnicity and stuff like that. Like, seeing everybody as we are all people and individuals.
Right.
And can we go about the ways of developing this game where we are including these people are feeling that they're being represented. They can find some sort of connection to someone, whether that be race or anything, or just experiences. I mean, because that's the thing. When you're playing games that are story-oriented or story-oriented or just for fun, I mean, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for some kind of connection, whether that be excitement or emotional, you know?
Right, but it's crazy to me that we use a female stereotype that is very negative, which is the over-sexualized, you know, big tits and no brain in video games. And if you did that with pretty much any other stereotype, you'd 100% be called out, and there would be problems.
Right. Why is this one so prominent?
If you had every African-American or African in your game represented as, like, a bumbling fool eating watermelon, like, people would literally...
They'll lose their shit.
They'd lose their mind. But because women are like, oh, I just want to fuck everything, and my boobs are huge, and everyone's like, yay, she's pretty. No one questions it. It's like, you know, that's ridiculous. That's not an accurate representation of anything or anyone. So it's like, you know, it's just this sick idea that helps people sell games, which I don't think should be used, but, you know, this is such a prolific problem in our society as a whole that all we can do is look at it through the lens of video games and point out what we see the errors as. And so, that this cosplaying girl who happens to be very attractive and enjoys video games is questioned about her loyalty to her hobby, or questioned
just because of her attractiveness,
which is insane.
Which is so weird.
If you had an attractive man who dressed up as a cosplayer,
no one would say
no one would ever
be like, he doesn't play video games.
He doesn't play video games.
Maybe some of the geek culture, because again, even in this article itself, there is the idea of like, the attractive women go for the jock, and jocks don't play video games because they play sports, and sports and video games are different.
Let me tell you, as someone who knows lots of jocks and is friends with lots of jocks, they play video games. Everyone plays video games.
I was gonna say, everyone and anyone can play video games. There's no restriction. And luckily, we're getting more into, like, with people that are disabled physically, developers are finding ways so they can enjoy these games and these experiences as well, which is awesome. That's the goal, is everyone and anyone can experience these stories and these experiences, no matter anything, any limitation.
It's the great equalizer. It doesn't matter who you are. You can participate. And if you practice enough and you work hard enough, you can compete. And that's what's really interesting about games, is that a 14-year-old and a 45-year-old skill is totally based off of practice and understanding. It has nothing to do with money, outside circumstances, which is why gamers get so upset when you're able to affect a system using wealth.
Right.
Because it's like Battlefront 2 is a perfect example of this. If you allow people just to purchase everything, those who have more wealth than others will take advantage of that.
Right.
And that can be very controversial, especially because gaming is viewed as such an equalizing force. When you offset that balance with, anything with money or sex, or it can get very dangerous very quickly.
I feel like some people have the mentality of it not being fair, because like we talked about in the last article, there is a level of skill that there is going to be a group of people that have, and those groups of people will stay at that high skill base for the most part. People might knock them down in skills, but they're still up there in the higher skill tree. So people that may think that's not fair will come to a game like, oh, now I can win if I just purchase this stuff, and now I can do better just because I have more money, or I have more abilities to access these things that will boost my skill.
And I will point out that obviously video games have a barrier to entry already, being prohibitively expensive for a broad majority of the population.
Right.
I mean, there are people who can't afford internet, there are people who can't afford game systems, or at least modern game systems, and games at $60 a piece are prohibitively expensive for large parts of the population. And, that's horrible, because games are super fun and they're a part of culture, and they're how a lot of us connect, but at the same time, it needs to be talked about as an art form. So
it's hard, because it's the same thing with, I think, art in general. It's like, there has to be some sort of commercial aspect to it, because that's what you're doing. These game developers are making this game ultimately to make money, because they are spending money, they are losing profit in the development of these games. And some companies take that farther than others, where the focus becomes the money, which it is. To keep the career going, and these people having jobs, and these people being able to support themselves and any families, they have to have money. But I think once you lose the care for the community behind this game, because a lot of it, the community is what keeps these games going forward.
Yeah, and this is the hard question that we're going to have to deal with in the next 10 years of gaming, is that unlike visual art, gaming is a community-created art form.
Right.
Just like film, there's an entire group of people that work to create the vision of a smaller subset of people, but each one of them plays an equal role in creating the final product. And so, like, in visual art, you have an artist who may have a studio and have people working below him, but he's the one creating the artistic vision, whereas in film and video games and other artistic mediums, you have a group of people, and that can be difficult, because then people are getting stepped on, and you have CEOs of gaming corporations that are getting paid billions of dollars, like the guy who created Fortnite is a billionaire, and you have people who work for Fortnite who have to work 7 days a week, 90-hour weeks during crunch, and are getting paid less salary than an average high school teacher. And, like, taking advantage of passion in the gaming, especially in gaming, is an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
Right.
And, and then there's the whole problem with misogyny and women as well. And so if you're getting underpaid, working 90 hours a week, and getting sexually abused by the people who are above you...
That's just going to cause people not to want to go into the industry.
It's going to cause... Yeah, and it's going to cause people not wanting to go to the industry, but it's also going to cause worse games. And at the end of the day, we all want better games. So we need to solve these problems now. We need to address these problems, or it's going to affect the quality, to bring it back to the last topic, of the games we get to play.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because we love games.
We do love games.
And we want people to, enjoy making these games, because a lot of people, I've seen just people that are really passionate about world building and creating and telling a story and tackling I mean, that's another topic. Some people hate quote unquote political topics in their video games, but I mean, like we were saying before, video games are an art form. Art is used to address some of these really difficult political issues or social issues or whatever, and it's a great medium to do that in.
And I was talking about this with someone the other day. It's like, art can be used to do a lot of things, and I'm not going to challenge people if they don't want politics in their video games, because video games are a great way to escape the realities of the world.
Right, exactly.
And so, I was talking to someone about comedy as an art form, and Dave Chappelle uses the reality of the world as a vessel to speak truth to it, and then uses comedy to lighten that. And that, it makes you think about the things that are happening. It makes you think about racism and misogyny and sexual assault and everything that's going on. And that's one form of the art. And the other form of the art is someone like John Mulaney, who uses humor to make you forget about the things that are happening. So he uses self-deprecation and, anecdotal comedy from his own life to, for an hour, make you forget that outside there's all these horrible things. And they both have equal merit. They're both funny. They both address the topics very well. They're both very successful comedians. But as in all art, it's like, do you want to forget or do you want to be remembered and
I think
inspired?
And I think most people, and this is a very generalized blank statement, but most people would want to forget. That's why we see controversy with social issues in video games, or with people like Dave Chappelle being on headlines because he says something that's related to current news, and it's just like, people don't want to hear about news. They want to that's why no one watches the news, because they don't want to hear about all the crazy shit that's been happening in the world. They want to be able to, especially with video games, like Kai was saying, escape the reality of their problems. They don't want to have their problems slapped in their face when they're trying to play video games. And I can understand that, but
especially when it's not only have their problems slapped in their face, but it's
you get to experience them.
You get to experience them, but often it's video games have a liberal bend to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to say this, but not all video game players are liberal. There are conservative players out there that, they don't want to be reminded of the other side of their beliefs constantly when playing a game.
That's fair, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, regardless, it shouldn't, whatever your beliefs are, you should be able to feel connected or some kind of representation in this medium that's video games, because like we were saying, it's for everybody.
You should feel connected, but you should also... I don't think they should stop making games that have political bends. I think it's extremely important to challenge people, and especially I think the people who it affects most are the people who are angered by it, because all art is trying to get a reaction. So whether your reaction is good or bad, that's important. And like, good reactions are great, but I think bad reactions are even better. If you're upset by something someone's trying to do, that's like they did something right. They challenged you. They made you think about something.
Right.
And whether you agree with it or not is not important. The point is that for a moment you broke through that like kind of just daily drone we all go through, and you had to think about something, and you had to address what your beliefs are. And I think that's the most powerful thing that art can do. And if video games hope to continue to be respected more and more as an art form, just as it took comic books a long time to be respected as an art form, or movies to be respected over, still photographs, we're going to have to continually challenge people. And there could be fun games that don't challenge you. I'm not saying there can't be. I'm just saying that developers need to think about what they're saying to their audiences.
And it's okay if people don't like these issues being represented in the games or are tired of them, because we're seeing it more prominently in gaming nowadays, where mental diseases or social issues or all that stuff is being tackled in games, and a lot of people are tired of it, and people are getting upset because of that. But it's just like any other genre. I mean, a lot of the times when a genre gets popular, it gets played out for a while, and then people are like, okay, like what's next, and they move on from that. I don't think that has anybody looking down on these social issues or these mental illnesses in a negative way. They're just like, okay, we've had this style of game for a while, like what's next kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if there should be a what's next, because those issues haven't been addressed. So like,
I mean, yeah, that's true.
Well, it's like, it's another problem in gaming that people feel that everything is for them. It's a very like, because of how personal games are,
That's how they're set up, which is hard to make.
They believe
not
that
think that
it's designed for them. Art is not made for a person. So like, if you don't enjoy it, that's fine. You don't have to enjoy it. You can go do something else you enjoy. It's one game out of the 1,000 that you're going to play in your lifetime. Like, it's okay to not like it. But
Right.
they take it so personally. They're like, why are all these games speaking about problems that I don't agree with or that I don't identify with? And, like, I want games for me. And it's like, the majority of games are for you. The
Right.
majority games are, like,
There's a couple
white male-centric shoot-'em-up games where you're... Like, the funny thing is that we talk about mental illness, and it's a huge problem in gaming, of people being like, oh, they're, like, trying to represent these mental illnesses. But Call of Duty, for pretty much all the Modern Warfare series, is, like, American GIs going to a foreign country and killing,
Yes.
people from a different country, and no one ever had a problem with it. They're like, oh, yeah, we're just killing, like, the Iranians, even
Right.
though it represents the real war that's happening, like, across the
Right,
world.
right.
But all of a
That's
sudden we
true.
try representing actual problems that are happening and actual battles on, like, a political scale, and people are like, I don't want politics in my game.
Yeah.
It's like, are you serious? Now you don't want politics in your game?
I also think there is the accessibility of people being more vocal on the internet now too.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started. The amount of things that I hear on the internet that I know the people saying them would not say in real life is like a 90-10 ratio.
Yeah.
Like, the anonymity of being behind a computer is so dangerous. I don't remember what it was. There was some stand-up comedian that was talking, and it was like, we're given the chance to do it all over again on the internet. Like, we can be whoever we want to be, and we all just pick the worst version of ourselves to
Right.
be. Like, we could be nice, we could be loving, we could be the, like, Dalai Lama on the internet, we could be like, wow, I really respect what you're doing. But we all decided, we were like, you know what? We're gonna be the worst
We're all just gonna be
possible version of
assholes on
ourselves. We're gonna say things we would never say in real life. We're gonna put everyone down because, in a very sick way, it makes people happy. It makes us feel superior and better, and that's a dangerous thing that we all need to come to terms with. But I think for the most part, it is getting better, though. Video
I
games
agree.
have improved with representing minority cultures, with representing women in a more reasonable way, and I think the culture in a whole is moving towards that. It's just that there's also been more discussion about it.
Right.
And
That's part
and
of it is.
gamers are a very vocal group, so it's like you're gonna have super progressive gamers that are like, yeah, I love it. I love the mental illness aspect. Like, I love that we're
Right.
representing minority culture through this. And there's gonna be the other set of gamers who are like, I want my damn games to not be touched by the minority culture. I want to shoot some damn friggin' ISIS, and I want to have fun. I don't want to have to think about the world.
Which I have friends like that.
Yeah. I think we all do. I think everyone has, opposite ends of the spectrum where it's like,
Which, I mean, and that's the other thing. I mean, I really enjoy associating myself with people that have different viewpoints because you can have these conversations.
And you
a lot of
learn.
People, a lot of people like being faced with the opposite thing they believe in because they feel personally attacked. You can believe what you want. I'm not going to feel attacked, but I am curious of why you believe this aspect because it opposes what I believe. And I feel like that's a good conversation to
yeah,
have.
he's a better person than I am. I, on the other hand, I'm like, why do you believe that? You're a fucking idiot. Like, you're a terrible person. And that is a problem in my character that I need to address. I'm just saying that I can understand why I'm a very, like, super progressive liberal person, and I look at conservatives like they're crazy, and I then have the realization of, like, oh, they also think I'm crazy. Which is fair. It's like everyone has their own perspective, and everyone thinks the other person's crazy. But really, we need to come together and talk and, work out our problems. And we don't do that on the internet. It's just like false communication, because instead of having an actual conversation, we just yell at each other. We're like, I hate you too, I don't believe in what you're saying, I don't believe in what you're saying. And it's not like we're like, this is why I think this.
No.
It's like, you're stupid, I'm completely delegitimizing everything you believe in. I can't believe you'd even think that. Don't talk to me. And that's not solving anything. It's just perpetuating
you're not
the
learning
anger
anything
that we
either.
already see. So
What we learned is the world is a crazy.
I hope this
Shit
podcast
place.
isn't too meta for people.
I feel like this episode might be a little bit.
There's a lot of large topics that we talked about. I just think it's important. I think it can't
Right.
be avoided. And obviously, people like, ironically, they're gonna be like, oh, I just want a video game podcast that talks about video games. And like, why are you talking about these issues in video game culture on
Right.
this podcast? And it's a mirror image of the issue that we're talking about. And it's
Right,
like, you have
exactly.
to address these topics. You can't avoid them. You need to talk about them openly and have
And
a dialogue.
the thing is, people don't talk about them.
Yeah.
Like if you go on any kind of podcast, again, generalization, I don't know this for sure.
I mean, for the most
For
part.
the most part, I mean, I listened to a podcast called What's Good Games. 3 women, all of them are amazing, and they're heavily represented in the gaming community, and they do great things for the community. They do charities, and they do all this stuff. And they say they still get people like, but do you actually like games? I know you just did this stream and you raised thousands of dollars for this great cause, but do you actually like video games? I know you talk about them, and your room has a bunch of like posters and plushes, but do you actually? You're attractive. Are you sure you like video games? And they say they still get that stuff, and they're just like, yes,
Yes, I like video games. I wouldn't do this if I didn't. I can't imagine the amount of work that they do just
Right.
to support the video game community and other communities that are misrepresented. So it's like, oh, it must be so frustrating. And being a male in this culture, I'm never questioned about anything. I can do pretty much whatever I want. People are like, wow, that's great.
being a white male in this
Oh
culture.
yeah. I'm white, so I have extra privilege where no one ever questions me about anything. And so it's like-
I'm black. If you guys didn't know.
no, he's not. Not by his voice.
Probably can't tell.
Another horrible stereotype coming
Actually, you
from the
can
white
tell.
guy in the room. But it's recognizing that there is an injustice and
Right.
an unbalance in culture, and how are we gonna fix it? How are we gonna make it better? That's the question. And
see-
start with gaming.
And if you just think about it in the fact of like, do you like video games? And if your answer is absolutely, I love it. It makes me go to another place. Shouldn't everyone be able to feel that way?
Right.
Like, shouldn't everyone be able to be like, I also like gaming. I also want to be represented in gaming.
No, you have boobs. You can't.
Right, exactly. So it's
You
like,
already have too many good things going for yourself.
if you think back just inwardly and think, I love games, I feel good when I play them, everyone should feel that way.
Right. Doesn't matter who you are.
Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you believe, doesn't matter what you look like. Everyone should feel like if you like this thing, you should be able to enjoy it without getting lambasted by the internet because you're attractive and you play games.
All right, well,
That's all we got today. Hopefully
we
you guys
got.
didn't click out.
Wipe those tears out of your eyes and stay classy. All right.
See you later, people.